It was a Friday when I decided to hit the road. My plan was to spend the weekend camping and hunting. The weather forecast was great, and I was excited to spend some time alone in the forest. I loaded my Jeep with all the necessary equipment: rifle, ammunition, canned food, a good sleeping bag, and my old tent. I arrived at Ouachita in the early afternoon. The sun was high, illuminating the forest in an almost magical way. The tall, dense trees formed a natural canopy, and the sounds of wildlife were an irresistible invitation to any hunter. I parked the Jeep in a secluded spot, grabbed my gear, and started walking into the forest. I wanted to find a good spot to set up camp before it got dark. After about an hour of walking, I found a clearing near a stream. It was the perfect place. Fresh, clean water, enough space to set up the tent, and a magnificent view of the mountains in the background. I started setting everything up. I pitched the tent, lit a campfire, and organized my equipment. Everything was ready for a peaceful weekend and, hopefully, a good hunt. As night fell, I sat by the fire, drinking strong coffee and enjoying the tranquility of the place. The sky was clear, full of stars. It had been a long time since I had seen such a beautiful sky. While gazing at the stars, I remembered the stories I had heard about Ouachita Forest. Tales of missing hunters, sightings of mysterious creatures. I smiled to myself, thinking it was all a big joke. However, a strange feeling started to grow inside me. It wasn't fear, but something like unease, something I couldn't explain. I tried to push those thoughts away, convinced they were just the product of my imagination. I decided to get into the tent and sleep early, to be well rested for the next day's hunt. I woke up at dawn. The air was fresh and damp, perfect for a hunt. Before starting, I like to have a hot cup of coffee and then head into the woods. I grabbed my rifle, checked the equipment, and started exploring the area around the camp. The first signs were promising. Deer tracks, scratch marks on trees, everything indicated there was a good amount of animals in the region. As I followed the trails, I felt like I was being watched. At first, I thought there were other hunters around, but if that were the case, they would probably communicate with me, something that didn't happen. I looked around, but saw nothing, just the tall trees and dense vegetation. I continued my walk, but the feeling didn't leave me. Something was wrong, but I couldn't identify what. Then I saw the eyes, two bright points in the middle of the vegetation, about 50 meters away. I stood still, trying to understand what I was seeing. They were large, much larger than the eyes of a deer or any other animal I knew. I grabbed my rifle and prepared to shoot, but the eyes disappeared as quickly as they appeared. I walked to the spot where I saw the eyes but found nothing. No tracks, no signs that something or someone had been there. The feeling of being watched continued. I decided to return to the camp, convinced that my mind was playing tricks on me. When I got back to the camp, it was almost dark. I prepared a simple dinner and sat by the fire, trying to relax, but the feeling of unease didn't leave me. Everything seemed normal, but there was something in the air, something I couldn't identify. Then I heard the sound, a low growl, almost like a snore. It came from the middle of the forest, but it was getting closer. I grabbed my rifle and stood alert, waiting to see what was causing that noise. The growl got louder, and then I saw it. A creature emerged from the darkness. It was the size of a fox, but very different. It had two long, thin tails that moved like snakes and small horns protruding from its head. Its eyes shone with a red light, and its body seemed covered in thick, dark fur. The creature watched me with a terrifying intelligence. It wasn't an ordinary animal, of that I was sure. I raised my rifle and fired, but the bullet seemed to have no effect. Quickly, the creature charged at me with impressive speed. I ran, leaving everything I had at the camp behind. I ran nonstop, not looking back, until I reached the stream. It was night, and the water was terribly cold, but I had to make a choice, since the creature was right behind me. It was either jump into the water or die, but there was another problem. The current was very strong, and I wasn't sure I would survive jumping in. But one thing I was sure of, I wouldn't die being gutted by a beast. So without thinking, I jumped into the icy water. The current carried me quickly, and I could hear the creature following me along the bank. I swam as hard as I could until my strength gave out. The water was cold, and I felt my body getting heavy. The last thing I remember was seeing the creature standing on the bank, watching me as I was carried away by the current. I woke up on the riverbank, surrounded by fishermen. They told me they found me unconscious, floating in the water. They took me to the nearest hospital, where the doctors said I was lucky to be alive. Today, when I think about that night, I feel an inexplicable dread. I stopped hunting. That encounter changed my life. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next story. I decided to go hunting on a Friday night. I needed some time alone in the woods, away from the city and the day-to-day problems. It had been a tough week at work, so nothing beat the silence of nature to clear my mind. Hunting was practically my tradition when I was stressed with the turbulence of civilization. I grabbed my gear, loaded it into the car, and drove to a hunting area I knew well. It was a remote spot where the few people ventured, and I could find peace. I arrived at my destination around 4 p.m. The sun was still high, but beginning to descend, painting the sky orange. I parked the car by the dirt road and started walking along the trail into the forest. That place always gave me a sense of tranquility. Tall trees, the smell of dried leaves on the ground, and the sound of birds created a perfect atmosphere to unwind. I walked for about an hour until I found a spot that seemed ideal for setting up camp. I finally found a place near a waterfall, with plenty of space to pitch my tent and build a campfire. After setting everything up, I sat by the fire and started preparing a simple meal. It was getting dark, and I enjoyed watching the stars appear in the sky as the fire crackled. After eating, I decided to explore the surroundings a bit before it got too dark. I grabbed my flashlight and shotgun, just as a precaution, and began walking along the trail deeper into the forest. The night was cold but pleasant, and the sound of the distant waterfall was comforting. But as I walked, I noticed that the silence around me was more intense than usual. I had been there several times before, but that particular day felt eerie. Something was off, and I knew it. Nevertheless, I kept exploring the woods. I walked about 50 minutes and hadn't seen any animals. Just when I was about to give up and head back to camp, I heard a strange noise, something I couldn't immediately identify. It was a sound I had never heard before, like a low growl coming from somewhere to my left. My heart started racing, and adrenaline kicked in. I tried to ignore it, thinking it might be a wounded animal or something similar. I kept walking, but the sound repeated, this time louder and closer. I turned the flashlight in the direction of the noise, but its beam didn't reach far. I started walking slowly. The forest was darker than I remembered. I reached a place that seemed devastated, with trees with several scratches, and some trees were broken, as if there had been a fight of titans hours before. When I arrived at this place, I stopped. The growling had stopped, but I felt something watching me. I tried to calm myself and thought about returning to camp, but my stubbornness mixed with curiosity was stronger. Suddenly, I smelled a strong odor of something rotten. It was nauseating and made my stomach churn. I gripped the flashlight tighter and kept walking. But before I went any further, I made sure the shotgun was ready to fire. The smell grew stronger with every step I took. That's when I saw something moving among the trees, a shadow of something large and fast. I stopped immediately. My body froze in fear. The growling returned, this time accompanied by heavy breathing. My hands trembled as I tried to keep the flashlight steady. The shadow moved slowly, approaching me. My instinct told me to run, but my legs didn't respond. Finally, the creature emerged from the shadows, and I could see it clearly. Dude, this is the moment you won't believe when I tell you. It was something I never imagined encountering in my life. What I saw was a creature that looked like a wolf, but it wasn't a normal wolf. This one stood on two legs. Its eyes glowed with a yellowish light, and its sharp teeth reflected the flashlight's beam. I was paralyzed for a few seconds. The creature growled again and took a step towards me. My reaction was instinctive. I raised the shotgun and fired. The creature let out a howl of pain, but instead of falling, it moved faster towards me. I fired again, and this time the shot seemed to hit it directly. The creature staggered and fell to the ground, but it kept moving towards me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I turned and ran back to camp without looking back. My heart was pounding uncontrollably, and my breathing was heavy. When I finally reached camp, I was exhausted and panicked. I threw more wood on the fire and sat next to it, trying to calm down. I spent the rest of the night awake, with the shotgun by my side and my eyes fixed on the darkness. The rotten smell still lingered in the air, but the creature didn't show up again. When the sun started to rise, I felt a huge relief. I packed my things as quickly as I could and started walking back to the car. As I walked along the trail, I looked back several times, fearing that the creature might be following me. I reached the car without incident and drove straight home without stopping. Throughout the journey, I tried to process what had happened, but nothing made sense. When I finally got home, I locked all the doors and windows, as if that could protect me. I never told anyone about this. I don't want them to call me crazy because even I, who lived through it, sometimes can't believe it. Thanks for sticking around till the end. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments what's the next story you'd like to see here on the channel.